Hello and welcome to Real Hi-Fi Help. Well, let's talk about why do we use power cables that are killing our sound. So, I personally find that sometimes I find myself thinking, are cables really snake oil? Because just so many of them just sound so bad, and companies want so much money for them. And it took me a long time to really find the few ones that give you a lot of value and the ones that are like the very best. But I would have to say that we're talking about 1% or less than 1% that's than what's on the market that I think is really, really good. So much of what is out there, I agree with a lot of people. You can really almost consider it a type of snake oil or a type of manipulated fake certain angle type of sound. So I just want to say that to start with. But let me just uncover some things that a lot of people don't know that haven't been through what I've been through. And I'm just going to uncover it here. I'm going to try and do it in 5 to 10 minutes time, so just be patient with me. Most companies put a huge amount of copper in the power cables, and they have a very thick individual type of thread. This could be OCC copper, it could be OFC, whatever. And you have to know that when you do these things, when you have thick threads in big amounts, this gives you the perception of power, of control, that you're filtering out noise. So in a way it's very good, but in another way it suppresses the sound. And it then, like I said here, it prioritizes macro dynamics over micro dynamics. So you have to find a certain type of balance. All companies are different. They have different ideas. There isn't like a certain way of that you have to do it in order to create really good cables. It's still a bit of a esoteric mystery that no one really exactly knows how to do. But some are a hell of a lot better than others. That is without a doubt. And that is the problem I have with most power cables, is that they're just so big, they're so stiff, there's so much copper in them, or silver, whatever, that it does its job. It does a really good job, but it does too good a job. And that's the problem. I often prefer listening to the most basic $1 power cables, because I know that if I pay typically $100, $500, 1,000 or 2,000 US dollars on a power cable, I know that many times that will give me a sound that is much better on certain levels, but it will also somehow suppress the sound, not letting it be itself, putting its own character influence on the sound. So you guys have to know that when you are buying cables, like with a lot of gear in hi-fi, you are often paying for a solution that in itself starts many other problems, and you can't often see those problems to start with. So you have to know that about cables. So, and also because we have to, these cable companies, a lot of them, not all, but a lot of them have to comply to safety standards, regulations. And, insurance have to cover potential losses. Governing bodies are paid to validate certain types of cables. And that is one of the reasons why we're using cables that are a lot more hard than they should be. Especially a lot of the cheaper cables, and especially a lot of the eBay copy cables, they have this problem where they put a lot of pressure on the threads, and they use some cheap plastics, and they use some certain methods that do change the sound, but it manipulates the sound in a very negative way at the same time. So if you read the text, you can see what exactly I mean here. So it's just really difficult. It's difficult to make a power cable where you can get all the threads inside the plug, and you're not putting a huge amount of pressure on the threads. And because of this, a lot of companies are resorting to tricks where they have to make small solid core threads, or whatever you call it, single core threads that are very small, and they have to use those instead of this finer thread, which is like the ideal way of solving a problem, simply because of space. You don't have a lot of space in these plugs, so there are a lot of problems that manufacturers have to deal with in order to put a really good sound into a power cable. And just think about it. If you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 different layers of stuff on top of the cable, and it has to fit like within an inch of that plug, it's almost impossible, because you need a huge amount of mass in order to transport a signal properly. And you need a lot of individual fine small threads. But the problem is that if you have threads that are too thin, it might not get passed to be qualified as a power cable, because then certain authorities can't approve your cables. So I'm telling you guys this because I hear this a lot when I go to friends' places. I hear a certain type of sound that does not represent the gear that they are using very well. It's the influence of these really, really bad cables with really bad plugs that are like controlling the sound and steering it in a certain direction. Especially when you're dealing with higher class gear that is a lot more reactive. You only have to destroy a system totally, a top neutral system, by putting something like a really bad copy Furutech plug on, and then putting a really bad copy power cable on. Let's just say they use a copied Cardas power cable. Those things are like horrible. That's all that you have to do in order to totally destroy a system. Now, I know a lot of you guys out there thinking that you're engineers and you know a lot better, and if that is happening, then there's something wrong with the design. To some degree, you are correct, and to some other degree, that is not entirely right. A lot of systems that are technically good are in some way locked, and the cables function as a way of like cementing the sound. And of course, when you have a very short signal and a weak amplifier, and you're putting that weak amplifier on a speaker, you can have a overly dramatic reaction from a cable that totally suppresses the sound. I will give you a very good example of this. I remember when I had my YBA Passion 100 amplifier. It's only about 60 watts, Class AB. And I had it on a pretty heavy, around 89 dB Vandersteen 1CI speaker. Sounded awesome. I went from one of the cables that my friend gave me, that actually sounded pretty good, to a normal Oyaide Tonami cable with 046 plugs. That cable totally killed my sound. I mean, sound was suddenly like 3 times heavier, and I just couldn't get a proper grip. And you could then say that that's because the cable is really bad. And to some degree, I would say that yes, for the systems that I listen to, at the quality that I listen to, I feel that that cable is really bad. But there's a bigger truth to that. When you have that cable on a more appropriate system, a normal transistor system that has a huge amount of available watts, 250, 500, 1000, 2000 watts. When you have that, you suddenly get the intended application of that cable, how it is supposed to sound. So in a way, I'm right, and in another way, I'm wrong. So that's what you have to recognize in hi-fi, that you can take a thing, and sometimes it can sound horrible, even though it isn't really horrible. It's just applied wrongly in a wrong context. So you have to figure out how to shape that sound, how to take that type of religion of sound and put it together with a similar religion of sound. So of course, when I did that, when I took it to a friend's place and he had like a Macintosh Accuphase Mark Levinson type of gear, suddenly I could hear that, like, yeah, okay, that's the intended sound. That's what they wanted to do. And that's, of course, a lot better. But personally, having used it on a lot of other systems, I still recognize the fact that that cable, gets those positive elements by suppressing other elements. And that is one of the reasons why you're paying the price that you're paying. So, not to talk bad about Oyaide Tsunami cables, good value for the price, but for me personally, I consider them heavy, dead, mechanical, to a certain extent. Not a dramatic way, but it will solve a lot of problems for a lot of, I would say, pretend hi-fi gear and mid-class gear and a lot of lower gear. But the really, really top gear, I feel that it holds it so much more back, and that's my opinion. But I just wanted to give you guys a really good example of that. Now I've written some things down here. I'm not gonna read them up because I'm trying to give you guys the best quality of content. I know it's not going to be the most presentable and most politically correct content, but I'm just trying to get this out so people aren't stuck, aren't thinking that they're locked into a certain type of sound and things are in a certain type of way. When we're dealing with hi-fi, we're always dealing with a multi-phased truth, a multi-version type of truth to everything. So yes, I constantly rave about certain brands being much better, really good than all the other gear, and I know that you've heard some of the worst gear that I consider worst gear, and you find that maybe to be better or not like the way that I say. My answer to that is just basically I try to take a lot of things into consideration: price, stability, everything in the right balance, how much time and effort you have to use, and how reactive the gear is. So I realize that there is a lot of gear that I have talked bad about, stuff like M-Labs, Meitner, Lyngdorf, stuff like that has a lot more potential. I just don't feel that is still worth it time and price wise, and that is the reason why I do a lot of the slightly negative feedback on some of these brands that you guys might not like. But yeah, I hope that really helps you guys in really figuring out how to get to your top end sound. And yeah, just like I wrote here, you know, I found that some few speaker cables actually sound better when you turn them into power cables. Now, I can't officially say that people should do this. I know a lot of people in the hi-fi world, you know, that have a lot of expensive gear realize this, that some of the few cables like Summer Cable Quadra Blue can beat a lot of power cables costing many thousands of dollars, even the 5, 10, 20,000 dollar cables, some of those cables, not all. But I just find it strange, and I kind of wanted to tell you guys about this so you don't feel that you're going nuts and that that you're all alone about this, because it's a very sophisticated world to navigate through, the hi-fi world. And just want to end with, whatever you do, just try and do what's legal and what your electrician advises. So this was just basically to give you a better understanding of what is going on with our gear, and why I think that a lot of people, I wouldn't say most people, but a lot of people, they are using power cables that are totally suppressing sound, taking it into a very certain type of sound. And yeah, I hope you guys can use this piece of information. So remember to like and subscribe. Bye.